peace I can't explain, a love that won the war is here now. Can you feel it now? Let it cover you. Let the Spirit rise up and break through the walls and beat down the doors and crash through the windows and cover the earth, the earth, the earth, the earth. Let the Spirit rise up and break through the walls and beat down the doors and crash through the windows and cover the earth, 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 the earth. Bricks won't hold it in, and lies won't hold it. Love will let it out, and we will let it drown. The dark place of fears and brokenness. Can you feel it now? Let it cover you. Oh, let the Spirit rise up, break through the walls, and beat down the doors, and crash through the windows, and cover the earth, the earth, the earth. Let the Spirit rise up, break through the walls, and beat down the doors, and crash through the windows, and cover the earth, the earth, the earth, the I love the words of this next part. Let's declare it. Come on.
Amen. Amen. Come on, can we just lift up some praise right now to our King? Come on. For how good he is. You know, I've been gone all week last week. And the band jokes they called me Billy Madison because I was going back to school some. So there's that. Hey, I love that movie. But anyways, so me and Dylan back here that plays bass, if you don't know him, you need to because he's awesome. It was his birthday this past week too. Happy birthday. I love him. And we were talking about just the goodness of God and some of the stuff that he's been learning. And he shared a quote with me that is just so good. And it said that it is impossible to exaggerate the goodness of God. Right? It's so true. Like we can say he's good over and over and over and over and over and over, and it would never be enough because it's just beyond that. His goodness is infinite. So being gone all week, you know that moment when you get home and if you have kids, you know what I'm talking about. And it just wrecked me because I walked through the door and it's like, Dad, you're here. I love you. Like, you know, almost knock you down, like, and just takes your heart and just crumbles it up into a little tiny piece. And my son, he's like me. He's really sensitive. You know, we cry at Disney movies. We embrace it. Don't lie, man. You do it too. But he just started crying. I said, "What's wrong, buddy?" He said, "I just love you so much. I love you so much." Shouldn't we be saying the same thing today? Dad, you're here. You're here. I love you so much. Hebrews 12 says this, verse 28, "Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire." Consuming, that word, constant, ever present, engulfing. He's here. Don't miss it. He's here. So let's embrace that today. Say, "Dad, we're here with you. And I'm so glad you're here because I need you." And maybe today for the first time you'll reach your arms out, not because someone's telling you to, but because you need a Savior. You need a dad. You need to feel His presence. And we'll worship Him with awe and reverence because we can't exaggerate His goodness and His love for us. Pray with me. Father, Dad, so thankful, as your word says. So we bow today in reverence and in awe of your goodness. Thank you so much that you're ever present, constant, a consuming fire. We love you. And God, right now, let that love and joy that we have just burst out in song for you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
The weapon may be formed, but it won't prosper. When the darkness falls, it won't prevail. 'Cause the God I serve knows only how to triumph. My God will never fail. No, my God will never fail. I'm gonna see your victory. I'm gonna see your victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see your victory. I'm gonna see your victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. There's power in the mighty name of Jesus. Every war he wages, he will win. Oh, I'm not backing down from any giant. 'Cause I know how this story ends. I know. Yes, I know how this story ends. I'm gonna see your victory. I'm gonna see your
every single time you take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. We praise your name. We're so thankful, humbled by your presence, God. Continue to move through this place. We worship you. It's in your name. Amen. Amen. You guys can take a seat.
Well, hello, Rock Church. How's everybody doing today? You good? Good. Good to see you guys. So thankful for each and every one of you. I love this service, 10:30. It's like a packed house today. So that's awesome. That's awesome. And want to give a shout out also to those who are watching from the C3 Coffee Bar, or if you're watching online, we are thankful for you. Aren't you guys thankful for everybody else who's joining in right now? And if you're a guest with us, thanks for being here. My name's Josh. I'm one of the pastors, and just excited about what's going to happen today. We've been in a series called Verified, and today is what we're kind of calling episode 4. And when we put this series together, this was the week I was most looking forward to. That to me, this week and what we're going to deal with is just so crucial and critical in our lives. So I'm so thankful that you're here today, whether you come all the time or whether you're a guest with us, because I really believe that today's going to be a great day. But I gotta kind of start the message by just simply asking you a question. Does fire amaze you or terrify you? Both? Who would say that fire amazes you? Raise your hand if fire amazes you. Okay. So we did this on our Rock app, and we found that about 75% of the people are amazed by fire. Who is terrified by fire? Anybody? It's okay to admit it. All right. So some of you are terrified by fire, and you might be looking at this, and you're just like, well, it's just a little match. That's not very terrifying. It's no big deal. And you're right, although a match can start a fire, correct? That's for our firefighters in the room. I don't want to be misleading there. But I know that a little match like that might not terrify you. So it'd be probably better if I brought out a lighter. And this is a blue flame lighter, which means it burns a little hotter. And this still probably doesn't terrify you because it's just a lighter. But when I bring this to the equation, right? I mean, now some of you are like, he wouldn't really do that, would he? All right, just a minute. How many of you dudes have ever done this before? Go ahead and raise your hand. Yeah, several. Some of you ladies, maybe. If you didn't use WD-40, you probably used Aquanet, right? Yes? Yeah, you're there? Like some of you are going, what's Aquanet? Just ask somebody who grew up in the 80s, and we will tell you what Aquanet is, right? So when you mix those two, you're just like, all right, that's amazing, but it can also be terrifying. When you mix those things, and don't do that at home, okay? But when you mix those things, fire is amazing, fire is inviting, but it's also extremely terrifying. Think about a candle. When you light a candle is inviting, that it draws you in, all right? Guys, that's why you light candles before your wife gets home, okay? Married men, that's why you light candles, all right? I'm trying to help you guys, all right? Because a candle is inviting. A candle will draw you in. The fire from it draws you in. Yet it can also be terrifying. Just this week, up in Delaware, a candle was lit, and a spark from the candle ended up burning down 11 apartment buildings. Then we just think it's just a little fire, a little candle, yet a candle is not just amazing and inviting, it is terrifying. Or take fireworks, for instance. How many of y'all love watching some good fireworks go off, right? And we all do. We're all like, look up, we're like, ooh, ah, wow, you know? And we do that. Or you buy some fireworks, like, oh, cool, wow, that's so neat. Yeah, but go ahead and admit it, raise your hand, if a firework has ever gone bad in your life. Yeah? Okay, it happens. It just happens. If you mess with fireworks, at some point they're going to go bad. I remember a time I had a firecracker. I will not tell you what I was doing with the firecracker because I don't want you to lose all respect for me, all right? But I had a firecracker, and I was getting ready to throw it, and as I was throwing it, when I got right here, it went off, all right? And so I already have a hard time hearing. That made it a whole lot worse. That fireworks are amazing. They're inviting, yet they're also terrifying. Or take lighting like a bonfire or a campfire. A campfire can be very inviting. You've probably sat around a campfire before, and it's just been inviting, and great stories and great conversations happen around campfires. Yet, if you sit around that campfire very long, eventually some people are going to start throwing stuff in it. At some point, some dudes are going to look at each other and say, I bet you can't jump over it. Like, those things happen because as dudes, that it's inviting yet terrifying. Just last weekend, I got a grill. I won it at a golf tournament one day, and I'd never used it. It was like a smoker charcoal, and I don't know if I've ever lit charcoal in my whole life. Sorry. I don't know if I'd ever done that before, but that day I was, and so I'm trying to light the charcoal, you know what I mean? I'm taking the lighter, and that's not working, so I'm putting a little lighter fluid on it, and that's not working, and my son Clay, he was there, and eventually I'm like, it's frustrating, so I grabbed the lighter fluid. And as I'm doing, he's like, Dad, that's a bad idea. I'm like, I got to get this stuff lit. And eventually I stopped. Whoom! Burned all the hair off, like singed all the hair on my arm. But the charcoal got lit. Fire is both inviting and terrifying. Today we're going to talk about a guy who had an encounter with fire. And in his encounter with fire, it was inviting, it was amazing, yet it was also terrifying. His name is Moses. He's a guy we've been talking about all through this Verified series. We've actually kind of just been doing a biographical study, been going through his life. And we talked about the first few years of his life. Then we talked about the next 40 years of his life. And then last weekend we talked about how he was going into the desert for the next 40 years. Well, today we're going to talk about a time that happened in his life when he was probably 79, 80 years of age. That he'd been in the desert for 40 years, and he comes in contact with some fire. And I believe the experience that he had back then is an experience that we all can have right now. And this is what it says. If you open up the Bible to Exodus 3, if you have your Rock app, it'll pull to that if you want to follow along, if not on the screen. It says this: one day Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. All right, let's just stop right there, all right? Let's just take our time and let's just kind of walk through this story here for a little bit, that if you come across this text, the very first thing you see is one day. That it's just one day. Now, I want you to think about Moses for a second. For 40 years, he has been tending to the flock of his father-in-law. For 40 years, he had been leading the sheep around. For 40 years, he had been doing the same thing every day. So in Moses' world, this was just another day when it started. That he had walked with the sheep, he had led them far away, and it was just going through another day, all right? And then it goes on, it says this, that he was tending to the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. Now, this is the first time that the Mount Sinai has really come in to the story, all right? Yet this is a mountain that is very specific, very special to the Israelites, to the Hebrew people. It's a mountain that later on in Moses' life, that he hears the 10 Commandments from God. And we talked about that in our last series. We're going to pick them back up in our next series. But this mountain became very important. All right? And it was not close to home. It wasn't close to his father. If you notice, he had led the flock far into the wilderness, to the Mount of God. And then it continues on. There, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of the bush. Moses stared in amazement that he sees this bush that is on fire, and it catches his eye. Now, again, I want you to think about it. Another day, another dollar, another day in Moses' life where he's walking down the path, he's leading the flock, he's finding something for him to eat. They would eat in an area. As soon as that grass or those bushes or whatever they were eating was ate up, then they would move on to the next place. And this is what he'd been doing. And now he's far away from home, and now he sees a bush like every other bush that he's seen along the journey, yet this one is on fire. And when you see fire, it invites you in. Let's think about it. If you're driving down the road and you see smoke, when you see smoke, you immediately think, what's going on there? Is somebody burning something, or is something getting burnt up? That those kind of things come into your mind. So Moses, as he's walking this path, all of a sudden this fire catches his eye. He sees it and he's staring at it with amazement. Let's continue on to the next part of the story. It says this. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. This is amazing, Moses said to himself. Why isn't that bush burning up? I must go see. That he went from an amazement of what's going on to I must go see. I must figure this out. I must take a step towards this. I need to understand what's actually going on in the midst of this bush that is on fire. That something was drawing his heart in as he wanted to know what was going on. And here's what I believe. That for some of us in this room today, for some of us at the coffee bar or watching online, that today is a day like no other. That maybe today is the day that you feel and that God has already started working on you, and he is drawing you in, that he's inviting you in to experience him. Now, maybe the day started like every other. Like for you, maybe it's like, it's Sunday. I got to wake up. I got to go to church. It's just what I do on Sundays. Maybe you've been doing that for 20 years of your life or 30 years of your life. You just show up at church. It's just another day at church. Or maybe for you, it's just that person in your life, friend, family member, kept giving you another invite, and finally you're like, fine, no big deal. I'll go. It's just another day. I'll do that church thing with my friend, and then I'll be able to check that off the list and move on. Maybe you're thinking when church is over, we're going to leave, we're going to go get something to eat with some family. That's just what we do on Sundays. And then we're going to go watch some football because that's what we do on Sundays. And then I'm going to finish my homework because that's what I got to do before Monday. And then on Monday morning, wakes up, what do? You get up, you go to school, you go to class, you go to work, you make it through the day, then you go to practice or you take your kids to practice, you go home, you eat some dinner, you check your social media feeds, you watch a little TV, then you go to bed just to wake up the next day. That it's just another day in your life. And maybe that's what you're thinking about your own life, that's how you feel like life is being lived right now, that it's just another day, another day, another day. Yet maybe today is the one day that'll change everything. That maybe today is the day that God shows up and changes everything in your life, and you weren't even expecting it. I promise you, Moses wasn't expecting it that day. That Moses was just on a journey. He was just trying to feed the sheep. He was just doing what he does every day. But on that day, it changed. And you can bet your last dollar that every time Moses told the story from that day forward, it was like, guys, I got to tell you about one day. I got to tell you about the day that changed everything. It was the day that I was just walking with the sheep, and all of a sudden I saw a bush that was burning on fire, and then the next thing you know, I heard the Lord speaking to me. That it was a day that changed his life. And my hope is today is that day for you. That today is a day that will radically change everything about your life. Maybe if you didn't even expect it, yet today is the day that'll change everything. I was talking to one of our buddies from church a couple weeks ago, and he said, yeah, the day he showed up at church, he had been in a tough situation. Him and his wife, they were in debt, they were struggling, they had young kids. They're like, I'm just going to take my kids to church. My kids need this. So he showed up, but while he was there, out of nowhere, wasn't expecting it, God showed up in his life and started drawing him in. He went there to take his kids to church, but he left there knowing that God had a plan for his life. And that was many years ago, and him and his whole family have been part of this church ever since that day, because it wasn't just another day, it was the one day that God changed everything. And maybe that's you for today. And maybe God's inviting you in, and maybe God's drawing you in, but here's what I need to make sure you understand. if you want to be drawn in, if you want to connect with God, it's exciting, it's amazing, it's terrific. Connecting and experience with God is a terrific thing, which means it is both amazing and terrifying. Don't lose sight of this. Even in that word terrific, the root of it being terror, that God is both inviting, He is both amazing, but He is also terrifying. He is both at the same time. Question, how many of y'all love to ride roller coasters? All right, so a lot of you love to ride roller coasters. Who in here would say that roller coasters are the most frightening, terrifying thing you could ever do, right? So there's a difference. That those of you who are terrified by them, you stand and look at a roller coaster and say, no chance. Those who love roller coasters would say this: the best roller coaster is the one that terrifies you the most. That put me on a roller coaster that when I'm at the top of the hill and I got this little bar across my lap and my hand's up in the air and I'm looking down going, oh, I'm about to fall to my death. And as soon as the ride is over, we're like, oh, let's do that again. You know what I mean? Because it's terrifying, yet it's amazing. Just 2 weeks ago, I was with several of the men from our church. We were out in Vegas doing a mission trip to help get that campus up and running. And while we were there, we were staying at the Stratosphere. Now, the Stratosphere is the tallest building in Las Vegas. And at the Strat, you can actually jump off the top of it and do an 833-foot fall down to the ground. And this is something that people pay a lot of money to do. And some of my guys were there, and they were saying, let's do it. So they went up to the top, and I stood down here. Only because somebody needed to take the picture, okay? That's the only reason. But bottom line is, two of our guys that were on the trip, David and Jason, they went to the top, and you can see this little bitty white dot on top of the Stratosphere. That's the ledge you jump off of, all right? And it's not a bungee cord. It's like a static fall, so you're on cables, and it kind of just takes you down, and it's pretty cool, at least from the ground. But here's what these guys said. They said they were all excited. They were jacked up about doing it, and they rode the elevator all the way to the top, and then they get out, and they start to step forward, and then the wind starts blowing everywhere, and then all of a sudden they are able to look, and they're able to see the city way below them, and then they start pushing them out on this, like, walk the plank type thing, and they both said, dude, it was terrifying. And they started counting down, 3, 2, 1, and David said, I think the guy shoved me in the back at one. Because next thing you know, I'm falling. And he said, it was incredible. Terrifying, yet amazing. Jason, the guy jumped. This is his picture of him landing, okay? Terrifying, yet amazing. That's what God is like. That God is both amazing and He invites you in, yet He is terrifying. And if you haven't met both the exciting, both the amazing God and the terrifying God, then you haven't met the same God that I've met. You haven't met that same God. Because if you sit there and think, well, I think God is just some judgmental old dude in the sky just trying to punish everybody, that's not the verified, real, authentic, genuine God. And if you think God is just peace, love, and happiness, then that's not the verified, authentic, real, genuine God either. God is both. That is who Moses experienced, that is who I have experienced, and it's who I hope that all of us have experienced or will experience today. That we will recognize that He is a terrifying God because He's an all-knowing God. Let's go back to the story, all right? Going back to Moses, it says this. Moses said to himself, why isn't that bush burning up? I must go see it. When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush, Moses, Moses. Here I am, Moses replied. And when we read that, I think too often we just read it like it's no big deal, like the bush started speaking, just said, called out Moses' name. I want you to think about it in a moment. That Moses had been a long way from home, walking by himself with all the sheep, and then all of a sudden he hears a voice coming from the bush, Moses, Moses. We hear that like it'd be comforting. I mean, think about it. God knows your name. That's comforting. God knows where you're at. God knows you. That's comforting. But God knowing everything about you also means that God knows every evil thought that has ever come through your mind. That God knows every wrong thing that we've ever done that we think that we've actually kept from people knowing. That God knows the meditations of our hearts, the thoughts of our minds, the actions that we do. You think your spouse knows you. Your spouse doesn't even know you that well. Because God knows everything that goes through here. He knows everything that goes through here, and He knows everything that these things have done. And I'll be honest with you, that scares me. Because I know how evil I am. I know the thoughts that go through this brain. I know the pride that is found in my heart. I know the actions that I've done. And knowing that there's a God who knows all of those things, that terrifies me. My guess is it should terrify you as well. The writer of Hebrews says it this way: nothing in all creation is hidden from God. Everything is naked and exposed before His eyes. And He is the one to whom we are accountable. That God will hold you accountable to every thought, to everything in here, to every practice that we've done. That's terrifying. I love that we have an all-knowing God who knows my name and knows everything about me, but it also scares me and terrifies me that that's the truth about God. But let me keep going in the story. That a terrifying God is a holy God. He's not just an all-knowing God, He's a holy God. The verse says it this way: do not come any closer, the Lord warned. Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. That Moses, remember, he was drawn in. He saw the flames, he saw the bush, he heard His voice, and he was drawn in. And as he was drawn in, invited in, God said, stop right where you're at. Because you have actually just entered into a holy moment. The ground that you are standing on is holy. So take off your sandals. Get bare before me, and then understand what you are experiencing. And what Moses was experiencing was a moment with God. That God was saying, I am here. But remember who I am. We've talked about this several times this year, and we'll continue through the course of this year, that God is a holy God. And that word holy means separate. It means set apart, a cut from above, a total difference. That's the God that we serve, that He is separate than any other God or any other religion or anything. He is different. And God was saying, Moses, I am coming to meet with you right now. So this is a holy moment. And I think too often in life we forget that. That we think, well, I'm just going to church. I'm just going to church and it's not a big deal. But no, it's a holy moment. Now make sure you hear this, because I think we've got it wrong at times. I think in the past we got it wrong because we called the church holy. Right? Like if you're going to church, you got to wear your best clothes. You got to put on your best face. Anybody grow up in that era? Anybody grow up in that church? That you can do that, and you could have some coffee or you could have some water, but you better keep it in the lobby. Don't you dare bring it into the auditorium or the sanctuary, right? You know, and then maybe you showed up here and you saw somebody eating a Bojangles biscuit during church. You're like, oh Lordy. See, I think we got it wrong in the past because we thought that the church building was holy. The church building is not holy. Let me remind you, this is just a box, okay? This is just metal and concrete, all right? I can promise you, this carpet is not holy. It's not. But you're meeting with a holy God, so the moment is holy. That the moment that we're in right now is holy. And I think because sometimes we are a come-as-you-are church and a comfortable church, it's just like, well, let's just come on in. Yes, come on in. But recognize who we're meeting with. A holy God who says this is a holy moment. So He is an all-knowing God. He is a holy God. He is an everlasting God, an eternal God. The very next part of the verse says it this way: I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. That what God was doing in that moment is he was identifying himself. He's saying, Moses, let me remind you who I am. That I am the God of your father. And then he went back to the patriarchs of the faith. He was going back to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, guys that Moses would have known of. He would have known their stories. So what God was saying is, listen, I am the eternal, everlasting God. That I was God back then, I am God today, and I am God forever. And that's the God you are coming in front of right now. Which means that's the God we are coming in front of right now. A God who says, I am who I am. And we'll dig into that next week. But a God who's saying, I am eternal. And what that should do to all of us is this should scare us. It should bring fear. It's what happened to Moses. Moses understood that the terrifying God is a feared God. The very next part of the verse. When Moses heard this, he covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. That he covered his face because he said, I am in the presence of God. That I'm just not in the presence of a burning bush. I'm not just in the presence of some fire. I'm in the presence of a holy, all-knowing, eternal God. And he covered his face with his cloak, and I can picture him falling down saying, woe is me. And I believe that because every place in Scripture that you see somebody encountering God, that's what they did. Moses did it. Isaiah did it. Isaiah said, woe is me. I should be dead. John in the book of Revelation, when he saw God, he said that he fell on his face as if he is dead. Because when you experience the true, genuine, real, verified God, you understand that why? He is different than me. Because he knows all and I don't know all. Because he is set apart and I'm not always set apart. Because he is eternal, yet I live a very earthly life. And when I recognize that, I should bring fear. That's who God is. But in all of that, still, make sure you catch this, he is also a compassionate God. That he is an all-knowing, holy, eternal, feared God who gives us great compassion and grace. The last verse I want to hit in the story says this. Then the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I am aware of their suffering, so I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt. Make sure you catch what is being said there, all right? Very similar to some of the things I talked about last week. It says this, that the people are seeing, that this holy, all-knowing, eternal God is a God who sees you. He is also a God who hears you. He is also a God who is aware of you. He says, I see your misery. I see your struggles. I see your hardship. I see your sin. I see your decision making. I see your marriage. I see your life. And I hear the agony of your heart. I hear your prayers. I hear what you're going through. I'm aware of everything that is going on. And because of all that, I will move on your behalf and rescue you from the situation that you find yourself in right now. That's the God we serve. A God who hears, who sees, who understands, who's aware, and moves on our behalf and rescues. That's what he did for the Israelites, and that's what he did for each and every one of us. Because he said, I see their sin. I hear their cry to be reconciled, to be in a right relationship with me. I'm aware of their situation, so I will rescue. And he did so when he sent Jesus to this earth. And Jesus knew that. So Jesus hung on that cross. And he died for each and every one of us. He was buried in the grave, and 3 days later he rose from the dead so that we could be rescued. God is a terrifying God. Yet he is a God who invites you in. Because let's be honest, if we only think about the terrifying side, we'd probably say, well, I don't want to have anything to do with that kind of God. Yet he is also a God of compassion who invites you in. So it leads me to really ask the question right now. Do you want to experience God? Do you want a verified experience with a verified God? See, I think too often in life, we just want an experience with some kind of God. We want to feel good. We want to feel better. We want to feel like we did something. But I want to ask you this morning, do you want a verified experience, a real, authentic, genuine experience with the real, authentic, genuine, verified God? Because if you do, you can have it. That's the beauty, that his presence is here right now, that we are in the midst of a holy moment. So as we move into this time of response, I want you to move into it with this idea that I can have a true experience with the true God. A holy experience with the holy God. That I can come before him and he knows the desires of my heart. And I can give those to him. I can come before him knowing that he knows my sin and my junk and the mistakes I've made. Yet he can forgive them. So I want to invite you to move into that. And again, maybe you came here today with that not in mind, but you're just like, man, I need Jesus. I need this. I was talking to a young man this week who came to church just last week. We were hanging out in a coffee bar, and we were talking, and he's like, man, something last week was happening. I just knew I needed God. And I was like, you just need to know a little bit more about Jesus, or are you saying like you need Jesus? He's like, I need Jesus. He goes, I don't even really know what that means. I just know that's what I need. And right there in one of our coffee bars, he stopped, he prayed to receive Christ as his Savior. Because God was drawing him in. And maybe that's you right now. That you came today and you weren't expecting to experience God, but there's something inviting your heart right now. There's something moving in your spirit. And you might not even understand what that is, but today can be an opportunity for you to connect with the real God. And you can pray and you can do that yourself. And you just say, God, I come before you. I want to surrender my life. And you might say, I don't even really know what that means, Josh, or how to pray that. Well, if that's the case, come to the Connect Corner or come to the prayer corner. There'll be prayer counselors at both places. We would love to help you say that prayer. Or maybe for you today, what it is you need to go to the prayer corner and you need to get down on your knees. And you just need to have a moment with God, a holy moment, because you recognize his presence is with you. And you offer up the things that are on your heart, the things that you know that he knows, but you're just like, God, I just need to give this to you because I just need help right now. Or maybe today it's an opportunity for you to take communion. There's communion up here on the stage. And don't come up and take communion because it's just Sunday and it's just what you do. No, recognize it's a holy moment with God, where the true, verified God is meeting you. And as you take that bread and you take that juice, you remember what Jesus did for you. Or maybe it's through the step of baptism. When you are baptized, it's a holy moment with God, where you get to experience what God is desiring of your life and the washing away of that sin and a pledge of a clean conscience towards God. Or maybe you're going to do it by just standing up and raising your hands and worshiping, or maybe bowing down and getting on your knees and covering your face. Whatever it is, understand that's a holy moment where the real, true God is coming to experience you, and you can experience him. So do me a favor, let's stand. And we're going to move into a time of response. And I'm going to ask, even as I pray, that we recognize what's going on, that God is with us, and then we go to meet with him. Pray with me. Jesus, thank you for accepting our prayers. Thank you that your presence is here, and I don't say that lightly. And it's such a huge, big deal that you are here. Through the power of the Holy Spirit, God, you are here. And we want to connect with you because we know, as Moses found out, life is found in your presence. Hope is in your presence. Joy is in your presence. Grace is in your presence. And God, as terrifying as you are, as big as you are, God, we know that right in your presence is where we want to be. So we come before you in your name. Church, let's respond.
Can't go back to the beginning. Can't control what tomorrow will bring. But I know here in the middle is the place where you promised to be. Not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here? Is all I want. Is all you want. Will you meet me here? As I walk now through the valley, let your love rise above me. Like the sun shaping the shadow, in my weakness your glory. Not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again?
this time. I'm not enough. I'm not enough. Yeah, lift it. Unless you come. Lead us in. Yes. You're all we want. To close out today's service, would you guys just go ahead and take a seat for us? We're going to celebrate some baptisms from last week. So let's celebrate these as a church.